Hello and welcome to the Ultra Rare Podcast. We're on episode 2, September 24th. Pretty fun puzzles today. I enjoyed the Doku and I enjoyed the grid a lot. So, we're just going to get straight into it. This is also the first episode that is being uploaded to YouTube. So, if you'd like, hop over to the YouTube. It is linked in the Spotify, or you can look up Ultra Rare Podcast on YouTube. It'll be there. So there will also be some live visuals, I guess. Let's just get straight into it. I don't want to dilly-dally too much. Today's puzzle was pretty easy for Doku, I would say. For top row, we have Dragon, Poison, and Normal. For side row, we have Final Evolution, Ground, and Legendary. Which is interesting, but not awful. Really, Ground Normal was my only hiccup. But we'll get to that. Let's start off with Dragon column, Poison, Normal, and we'll go through all of the parameters for those. So let's start with Dragon. We have Dragon Final Evolution. Now, there weren't a lot I could think of for this. Really, my best idea, I came up with Como. That was all I could do. I could have done Tyrantrum, Executor Alola, Appleton, Flapple, Naganadel, Noivern, Arcaludon, Flygon, Baxcalibur, Gudra, Hisui. A lot of great picks. I went with Como-O, which wasn't too high, only 2% over the most common. Honestly, a lot more common, or a lot less common than I thought it would be. I thought everyone was going to be on Como-O, but they weren't. But, yeah, Como-O, fine pick. You can go with a lot of things here. Dragonite's simple, but just think a little bit. There's always pseudo-legendaries. There's always Hydreigon. There's always Salamence. Those you can at least get. You know those. Gudra. Some simple ones. Garchomp, obviously. I'm shocked Garchomp wasn't the most common. But maybe that's because it was used later. Next up, we have Dragon Ground. Now, here's where Garchomp comes in. A lot of people went with Flygon. Second most picked was Garchomp. And what's crazy, and what is probably the best and most well-rounded tip I can give you for the PokeDoku and the PokeGrid is make sure, well, before you do this, make sure that the Mega you're picking doesn't change types, because that does happen relatively often. But if you know the typing, Mega is always better. Always pick Mega Gengar. Always pick Mega Garchomp. Always pick Mega Charizard Y. Things like that. Things that we know don't change typings. So Garchomp Mega, I know, does not change typings. Steelix also doesn't change typings. So could have gone Garchomp. Garchomp was a 17%. Simply by picking Mega, I went down to an 8%. Some other great picks were all of the Zygarde forms, Vibrava, Gibble. Honestly, I had no idea Gibble acquired the ground type that early, but apparently he does. So, not too bad of a pick for me. Pretty dang close to least common. Let's get to Dragon Legendary. Now, of course, there's a ton of Dragon Legendaries. I'm immediately thinking Koraidon and Miraidon, right? And I didn't think of them, which is actually a little sad. But, there's so many picks you could go for. Mine were, I think, yeah, just slightly rarer than Koraidon and Miraidon, was Ultra Necrozma. I know. I preached it last episode. Learn the Necrozma forms. Necrozma forms are awesome. They're always so rare. So I went with Ultra Necrozma, a Dragon Psychic type. Also there's only 3 Dragon Psychic types, 5 if you count Megas, and Necrozma is one of them. So Necrozma was a 3%, but you can pick a lot of things here. Dragon type Legendary, but really try to think more outside the box. If you know Reshiram, then you know Kyurem. If you know Dialga, then you know Dialga Origin. Things like that. If you know Rayquaza, you know Mega Rayquaza. If you know Latios or Latios, you know Mega Latios or Latios. Stuff like that. There are a ton of options you can do for Dragon Legendaries, because pretty much all of them are dragons. So, a lot of expression that you can do there. A lot of fun. Zygarde was still the most common, or most rare. So I might have to tap into that. I guess Zygarde is untapped potential. He does have 3 forms. So, yeah, that's nice. For Poison Final Evolution, there were quite a few picks here. Amoonguss was rare. Slowbro and Slowking Galar were rare. Then there's things that are kind of spooky, like Ariados, Dustox, things that I wouldn't, Victory Bell, things that I didn't immediately know were poison type. I went with Glamora because I see it a lot in Showdown when I play Pokemon Showdown, and same thing with Clodsire, things like that. There's a lot of avenues to go here. 97% guessed this correctly, and for good reason. It is pretty dang standard to find the end of a poison type evolution. Even the most common was 6%, and that's Dragalge, which is shocking because that's a really great pick in my opinion. So it's pretty much impossible to have a bad pick here. I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. Sneasler, Overquill, Venomoth, Beedrill, Crobat, Vileplume, Nidoqueen, do what your heart desires. When it's something like a poison final evolution, you know that there's so many, but all of them are, there's not one that's gonna lead the lead the charge. I mean, it's never been more obvious. Dragalge is the number one. If Dragalge is the number one, then there's no poison type that leads the charge. Next up, we have Poison Ground. I was a little scared by this at first, but this actually came up on a grid a while back, so I knew it. There's only 4 of these. Now, the most common was Clodsire, but if you really, I mean, you could say that, but Nidoqueen and Nidoking were 24% and 22% respectively, making the Nidos the most popular by far, and it probably should be the first thing that you think of when you think Poison Ground, but as we can see, probably not the one you should pick. So, kind of, I mean, it's a hard one because there's so little, but when it's a pick like Nidoqueen or Nidoking, in my experience, those are always some givens. Wooper Paldea is also a fun one that I had not thought of and that I wish I did. So, Poison Ground is one of those niche types that can be kind of scary sometimes. It's important to study up on that. Next up is Legendary Poison. There is only 4 of these. There is Eternatus, Fezandipiti, Okidogi, and Munkidori. The trio. I believe they're called the Loyalty Trio or something like that. What kind of threw me off about the legendary category here was they don't allow Ultra Beasts, Mythicals, and I want to say there was one other thing. But Ultra Beasts and Mythicals do not count as legendaries. So I ask, what makes a mythical? When I think legendary that isn't an Ultra Beast or a mythical, I think box art. Or I think, even if it's not box art, you know, Eternatus or Necrozma, even though Necrozma is box art, whatever. I think things like that. So I went with Eternatus, but apparently Fezandipiti, Okidogi, and Munkidori is considered a legendary. So I don't know what legendary parameters are and mythical parameters are. Maybe I could study that up, be a better podcast host. But yeah, Fezandipiti, Okidogi, and Munkidori, all poison types, important to know. Fezandipiti's fighting, Okidogi is... No, Fezandipiti's fairy, Okidogi is fighting. And I forget what Munkidori is. But all decent picks, and I wouldn't hate you for Eternatus. A lot of people did pick Eternatus. Half of people. Next up for normal final evolution, there's a bunch. Of course, Snorlax is immediately coming to your head, but you don't want to say Snorlax. There's Snorlax, Slacking, Stoutland, Pidgeot, Raticate, Persian, Blissey, Lanoon, Ursaluna, all of the birds, Beware, Greedent, a ton. There's a ton here. I went with Toucannon. I love Toucannon. I love Toucannon and Trumbeak. Some flying normal types, they do me so well. They've never wronged me, and they've never been common. So, yeah, not much to say there. You can think of that. Just try not to do Snorlax. If not Snorlax, think, I don't know, a Slacking or a Stoutland or a bird. Birds are always very fair ideas. Next was the one I actually missed, which was Ground Normal. Now, I'm a little pissed at myself because I was thinking, Ground Normal, I feel like this just doesn't exist. Obviously, it must. There's only 3. There's only 3. It is Diggersby, Ursaluna Blood Moon, and Ursaluna Regular. A little disappointed because I do know the Ursalunas, but I wouldn't beat yourself up about this. If you can't think of Diggersby and you're not versed with the new, especially a spin-off game like Arceus, not saying Arceus wasn't great, but this is a really hard box. 72% of people got this, which is probably the lowest on this entire grid, it would seem. Oh, actually, we'll get to 71 in a second. But yeah, really difficult. I kind of beat myself up, but yeah, dig down deep, I guess. Get verse. Those are hard. All I can really recommend in that is, yeah, I really don't know. That's just, I hope you know. I hope you know. Last up is a normal legendary. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Mason, you went Regigigas here? Again, I don't really know what's considered a legendary, what's not a mythical and what is a legendary. I figured Regigigas is probably legendary. I don't know if Necrozma and Eternatus are, maybe Regigigas. So I went Regigigas, which was by far the most common, 48%. But there's a lot of other picks you could do here. Terrapagos, admittedly, that was a mistake on my part. Terrapagos is definitely a legendary, and a good one at that. All three of the three bottom three, as far as rarity, were Terrapagos, Terrastal, and Terrapagos Stellar. So all great picks. Also Type Null and Silvally, which outside of this, I would 1000% recommend using Type Null and Silvally all the time. They are such great picks. Always, always strong mono normal types. They can be used a lot more often than you'd think. That'll be kind of it for today's Doku. Kind of difficult, but also ground normal and legendary poison are really the only ones I could see bringing difficulty. Overall, not too bad, and there's a lot of room to be very basic, very common, and there's a lot of room to really stretch your wings. Don't be like me. Don't play Regigigas. And lesson learned, the loyalty trio are all legendaries, and it's not just Eternatus. That's all. Let's move on to the grid. Now for today's PokeGrid. Today was, in my opinion, a pretty fun one. I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. We have, for top row, 5 feet slash 1.5 meters or shorter, can learn Iron Head, and no evolution line. And for that side row, we're looking at Rock, Steel, and Monotype. This is one of those immediately where there is just so much room to have fun. The most common digits on here, or the highest common digits are like pretty high, mainly because the Regis are a super easy thing to lean on, and people always lean on those Regis. But you can do a lot better than that, and hopefully you did today. I know I did. So we're going to get right into it. In top right, 5 feet or shorter, Minior Violet Core. That is certainly a pick that I stole from the leaderboard. I'll admit. I used my undo on that one. 5 feet or shorter is, again, a very easy task. We can all think of 5 feet or shorter Mons that are rock type. Some great ones are, Geodude's basic, but Cloth, Solrock, Golem, who knew? And, of course, the Miniors. The Miniors are so important to know. Also, the Knackle and Knackle stack would have worked. But the Miniors, I'm actually very disappointed I didn't think of the Miniors. I can do that. I'm better than that. If I can recommend anything over studying Necrozmas, it's study the dang Miniors. Those are pretty special. Pretty special. Minior Violet Core was the most rare that I saw when I did my undo, and it worked out pretty well. But of course, there's a ton of options here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of delving into my pick too much. Let's move on to Steel 5 feet or shorter. There's a lot of good picks here. I thought for a while I wanted to do better than something like Durant, but I couldn't. But there's a ton. Genesect, probably wouldn't have taken that risk. Fortress, Probopass, Sliggoo, Hisuian form, Bastiodon, Dewblade, Iron Treads, Bronzong. Now, I'll admit, some of those are definitely risky. I would not have gone Bronzong. I would not have gone Iron Treads. But some of those certainly were great ideas that were kind of obvious. Kartana, Meowth Galarian, Golden Go, or I believe Gimmighoul, also Steel type. So there was a lot of great picks there. I decided to go with Durant, but the most common thing you could have done was Aeron. And I feel like we know better than to use Aeron. We can think of Clink. We can think of Durant at the minimum. Now for 5 feet or shorter Monotype. This is super simple. Just think of a Monotype. Think of a Monotype, and it's probably going to be shorter than that because a lot of final evolutions are dual type. I'll get to mine later, but there's things like Mian Shao or Serena or Lycanroc Dusk form, Greedent, Shellos, Spinda. There's so many. Short monotypes. Most monotypes are going to be short because they're probably not fully evolved. I decided to go with Clobopus, who is a very niche pick. Really, all I know about him is that he's monotype. I think he's a fighting type. I don't even know what he is. It's very specific scenarios you can use him, but if I ever pull him out, he's always. I mean, this thing was unique at 7. The grid had been up for 7 hours, and still nobody had picked him. So again, one of those grids where there's a lot of room for expression. Really use your brain. Don't immediately answer. Think about it. Think of something kind of dumb and out there that no one would think about. That'll work. But don't take risks like picking things that are really close. Like I would not have put Genesect for 5 feet or shorter steel. But if you're that guy, if you know that, then go for it. Let's move on to Can Learn Ironhead and everything below it. Can Learn Ironhead Rock type. This was the last thing I believe I picked. Yep. Besides my undo. And it definitely took a lot of thought. Some great picks were Minior again, but there's a good chance you wouldn't know it was Minior. I certainly didn't. Nihiligo, Mega Tyranitar, or just any of the Tyranitar line. Knacklestack, uh, Amara, Aurorus. Besides that, it's really difficult. I can't give you very many recommendations. I mean, Bastiodon, an obvious one. Probably the entire Aeron, Aggron line. But I thought Terracion's a rock type. Maybe Terrakion, because he's got a big old head. I went with Ironhead. That was a bit of a risk. But it worked out. And if you have a risk and you really have faith, some moves, like I delved into this yesterday with Dragon type Flamethrower. Ironhead is a steel type physical attacking move that a lot of things get because it's good coverage. So I would have faith, more faith in Ironhead than other moves. Would definitely recommend doing that. Now for steel type Ironhead, I couldn't think of anything that didn't seem super obvious. And I mean, that makes sense. It is a steel type, so it's not like you're going to pick another type that can learn Ironhead like I did for Terrakion. So Probopass, Magearna, Golden Go, all excellent ideas. I wouldn't have thought Golden Go. I thought Golden Go was too special to learn Ironhead, but the more you know. I went with King Gambit, just in my experience. I see King Gambit use Headbutt all the time in Showdown, or Ironhead, sorry. But I thought he would be a lot more common than he was. But honestly, not a lot of people were thinking King Gambit. Everybody's going to think Steel type with a big head. You know what they're going to put? They're going to put Steelix. They're going to put Steelix, and they're going to put Registeel, who I believe was #1 this morning, if I'm not mistaken. He's also #1 in Ironhead Monotype. So clearly a lot of people knew that he was learning Ironhead and a Steel type. But, yeah, that one... it scares you because you feel like no matter what you do, you're not going to be adequate enough. But if the most common was 8%, I guarantee you not very many people felt sad after they clicked that one. Last up for Ironhead is Monotype. There's a lot of regions you could go with this. Let me look for some inspiration because I think mine's kind of a bad example. Meowth Galarian, Komala, Lycanroc Midnight, Lycanroc Midday, Phalanx, Silvally. Honestly, a lot of these leaderboard picks are that for a reason. They're not expected. Some other good ones are a Mega Aggron if you really, have nothing. Mega Aggron is a monotype, by the way, loses his rock typing. Good to know. And of course he learns Ironhead. I decided to go with Zamazenta because I figured Zamazenta, I don't know, he has a iron form. Obviously, I can't use the iron form. Also, fun fact, Zacian and Zamazenta have monotype forms, and that the forms without all the steel on them don't have, of course, their steel typing. But I thought Zamazenta regular could probably learn Ironhead, and I was right, which is swell. So, I guess really dig down deep, and again, Ironhead's one of those moves where a lot of things learn it. You can be pretty darn confident if something is physical and has a distinct head. It'll probably learn Ironhead. Last category for column is rock. Or not rock, sorry. No evolution line. Immediately, I didn't have a lot of great ideas. I decided to stick with Lunatone. I thought about Solrock, but I liked Lunatone. Another good pick was obviously Minior. So mad at myself for not getting that. Could pick any Minior form. That seems to be the general consensus. I'd say there's no real pattern in the colors. Minior would be a great one there. Always stay on the lookout for that. For Steel type, that one was a bit different. Um, for these monotype ones, by the way, or not for sorry, for the no evolution line ones, all of them were Regis. Regirock, Registeel, and Regice. Registeel actually got 2 places on the most common leaderboard. So don't be that guy. You can think of a rock type with no evolution line. There's so many rock types, and with so many mons, a lot of them aren't going to have an evolution line. Lunatone was my pick. There were much better than that. That I should have gotten. But if that's all you can think of, that's all you can think of, really. I mean, I would always, always, always say if all you can think of is a Reggie, please don't put it in. I'll preach a lot on this podcast that, if it's all you have, put it in. And it's better than sitting there and doing nothing. But please, please don't put Reggies on the leaderboard or on your grid pretty much ever. It's probably never going to work out. So now for Steel, this one is also a bit interesting because there isn't, I feel like, a ton of Steel types. Zamazenta and Zacian were some of the runaways, but Mega Mawile, Stunfisk, Galarian kind of took over. Necrozma, Duskmane, Iron Treads, and with Necrozma, Duskmane would also be Solgaleo, who's a Steel Psychic type. A lot of pretty fun picks, but none of them are going to be exceptionally rare. Even the most rare, which I believe is Zamazenta Crowned, is nearing on 1%. It's nearing on becoming an ultra rare. Not a legendary. But last up, I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory. I don't feel like there's much I have to say there. Please don't use Registeel. But there's certainly a lot of lateral thinking you can use. Try to think legendaries for sure. That was my first. That's what I think of every time I see no evolution line. And if you really struggle with finding them, I'd call that a pretty good habit. Sometimes when you default to obvious things like that, they can end up being common. But really, legendaries are consistent. And even if you think of legendaries, if you think of kind of an out-of-the-box legendary like I did with Zacian, things can work out pretty well. Things like Dialga would have worked, Dialga Origin, because they have the same typing. Things like that. I went with Zacian. It was a fine pick. For monotype, no evolution line, this is kind of up there with 5 meters or shorter and where there's so many things you can do. You know there is when the most common answer has 5%. 5%. There's so many great ideas. Kyogre Primal Reversion. I love that. Tornadus. Yeah, I mean, both of the Tornaduses, all of the Lake Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit. You could even go for a Pincurchin or Carvine. Any of the Deoxys forms. So many ideas here. I was on my Zamazenta and Zacian kick, and as I just mentioned, they are monotypes. So whenever I see monotype, I immediately think Zamazenta and Zacian. Or, yeah, Zamazenta and Zacian. And I think it's good for you to have, I said that last time, just have things in your head. Have your go-tos. For me, my go-tos are monotype. I like to use Zacian and Zamazenta, hero forms, because I know not a lot of people know that. Find something, a niche that you can have, and let it spring out like this. I was able to let my Gen 8 knowledge shine. For once in my life, that game is good. And it is invaluable to me. Invaluable to me. So, I mean, there's so many things you can think of. You could put a Reggie there and it wouldn't even be that bad. You could put Kangaskhan, Stonejourner, Avalugg. Have some fun with it. Again, this is one of those grids, just like yesterday, where there's so much opportunity that it really should be a very low score. And if it's not, of course, you're still growing as a player, and that's fine. If you just did this and you beat it, because, I mean, Ironhead is a pretty tough thing, if you don't know Ironhead. I got pretty lucky with Rock, Steel, and Monotype. Definitely my Monotype and Rock were outlandish answers that I didn't have full confidence in. If you messed up today, I wouldn't beat yourself up. As much as I say, we really shouldn't be doing this or this, you're your own person, and that's okay. But, honestly, a very purple and pink grid today, just like yesterday. Grid is on a great roll. There's a lot of freedom of expression. Minior got 3 slots. Four? No, three. 3 slots it was viable in, which is always funny. Yeah, I think a monotype no evolution line should be pretty easy. Worst comes to worst, think of legendaries. Think of the Reggies. Think of, I don't know, yeah, Kyogre, Groudon. I could go on and on and on. Mewtwo, Mew, Mega Mewtwo, Y, not X. Things like that. There's a lot of super great picks you can have today, and I really love the grid. I also love the Doku. It was a very strong day. Honestly, I think that's all I have to say. Try to take the tips I had into account for your next grid. Sorry this episode's coming out a little bit later. Also, check out the YouTube channel. Check out the Twitter. Um, and I'll see you on the next one. And remember, study the Necrozma forms. Necrozma is always rare, and it has the same typing as Solgaleo and Lunala. Study Necrozma. I'll see you on the next one.